Hey everybody, it's Bernie Gallerani, and I'm bringing you another episode of Success is Not Convenient podcast. I've got a really great guest on the show today, and this is going to be a fun topic. It's something that I've been looking forward to, and I'm actually pretty passionate about, and it's all about personality styles. We're going to talk about how each person that we meet has a different style and how we should approach them as a salesperson, and how difficult it can be if we don't to actually have success as a salesperson. So we're going to talk, and so I have Kylie with us. So Kylie, thank you. And Kylie is pretty well experienced in the personality style. So it's going to be a lot of fun having this conversation with you here for a little while and kind of digging into how we can all improve being better salespeople. I do want to say this to you though, guys, and we didn't do this in the beginning, but we're going to do this now. Hit the like button and also hit the subscribe button. We would love for you to continue to keep getting these messages, and we want to make sure that we're filming these and getting these over to you each and every week. So again, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and we'll make sure that that actually gets over to you. So Kylie, we are going to talk today about personality styles. Okay. A lot of people don't even think about what that means because we're just like, well, people are just difficult. And right? And, I love what Jim Rohn says. He goes, there's only like one jerk in the world. He just happens to move around a whole lot, right? Yeah. And so what it really is how do we relate to people that are different than us, but yet still make them feel comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah. I've learned, and you can elaborate on this, that there's 4 styles, right? And you and I were talking off camera that there are 4 styles, but they do have other things to them that we probably should know, right?
Yes.
So we have the driver personality.
Yes.
We'll get into what that means. We'll have the expressive, the analytical, and the amiable.
Yes.
Right? So go into some depth. Let's talk about the driver personality, pluses, minuses, maybe, like what issues do people have with drivers, but what's also their attributes? What is it about the driver personality that people like or don't like?
Yeah. And just for context too, because the rendition of the 4 has carried on different names through time. So they initially started as 4 different names. So it started as choleric, sanguine, melancholic, and phlegmatic. So those are the original name for the 4.
For those 4?
Yes.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
And then over time, they've developed into, the disc profile, or dividing it up by color, or as we use the driver, expressive, amiable, analytical, which I actually think is most easy to identify them by that length, by those names.
Because it can get more complicated when you start thinking of the depths of the wings and things like that, which I've learned from you.
Yeah, well, I mean, if that's just more generic to describe that personality style a little bit easier, versus if you say choleric against driver, well, driver kind of inherently you can yield that they're probably pretty motivated, versus choleric is a little harder to name.
So like the driver is like a control freak, usually likes being in charge.
Yeah,
okay.
So you think about a driver is a bottom line thinker, all right? So they're a results-driven thinker. They think all about how does it take to get to the end goal, and so they're constantly thinking about that. Their Achilles heel, though, and how they're easy to identify, is they can be pretty abrasive to most people. Yeah. Right? They have no problem with, not to say that they like confrontation, but they certainly don't have a problem calling people out. It's actually, and one of their core needs as that personality is to not be controlled. They don't want to be controlled. Therefore, they can have a tendency to control other people, right? Because they don't want to be the one who's out of control, right? But what they really care about, too, is they do care about people, but they have an interesting way of showing it. And their way of caring about people is trying to help them achieve what they deem is important.
What they deem is important.
Correct.
Because we all have a different level of importance that we want to drive our life by.
Yes.
And they're result-driven personalities?
Correct. And to be honest, so they make extremely good business owners because they are constantly looking at the numbers, the bottom line. They're making sure that the company is functioning. They, again, have no problem calling a department out if there's an issue and correcting that issue. Generally see a lot of drivers in CEO, company owning positions. They're also very good risk takers. So they don't have as much risk adversity in that sense, where they're like, well, let's just kind of try it and figure it out. And then they're also better. They're good at analyzing in the moment. So you wouldn't really classify them as someone who analyzes and thinks things through beforehand, but they're good at analyzing within a particular situation.
That's interesting. So those are some positivenesses to the level of success that they can achieve. Maybe some wrinkles in their personality too, right? So, because we're going to get into what doesn't work with different styles and then how we combat that, right?
Yeah.
So what is the negative side then? What is, because you can't, from a driver's side, there's probably not a negative. From another perspective of the other three groups, there could be a perspective of some challenges from the driver's side. So
Yes.
What is it that people don't like about driver personalities?
Well, I think most of generally the other temperaments as a whole are naturally more confrontational adverse. So they don't want the confrontation, whereas a driver just doesn't, they're just...
Because they don't understand it.
They're just willing, not that they want it, but they're willing to go at it if they have to, right?
Sure.
So what happens is they can be very confrontational to people, and then the other person doesn't know how to respond in that. So they can either shut down, it creates a fight or flight, so they could fight back. So because the personality is very reactive, it can create a lot of tension in the other personalities that are responding to it. But coming from, like, especially if you're an employee, one of the best ways to handle that is to have a backbone. So you have to stay firm in what you believe, but then ask questions. The choleric or the driver is also someone who wants to feel like they're understood before they'll understand.
So is that because of the impatience of their personality? They think they're clear in their message, but because they're so direct and not at a level of being patient and explaining it.
Well, and they're having an emotional reaction. So they're passionate about something, probably a results thing. So
because they're results driven.
They're results driven. So they're having a reaction to a result that's not happening. And they're having a very hard time hearing another person until their point is heard first. So as in person, when you're coming to a driver, you have to be really steady and you have to really hold your ground on what your side of things, but you also have to not be reactive back, because that's the tendency, is you want to react back.
Do you feel that if you, as a let's just say as a non-driver talking to a driver, that if you hold your ground and aren't reactive back, that is actually a position of respect from the driver's position, that they have a higher level of respect for the person because of how they approach the conversation?
Yes. If the person can stay level-headed, logical, and stand their ground, then the driver person will eventually come around to seeing their side.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That teaches me a lot, just a little bit in this conversation.
Because you're
I'm a driver. Okay. All right. So, all right, let's go to the opposite of a driver. Complete opposite is an amiable.
Yes.
Okay. So what are the traits then of an amiable personality?
Yeah. And also that original term too is also phlegmatic. So if anyone knows that polarity, so phlegmatic, 180 degrees, and also has its strengths and weaknesses completely opposite.
The golden retriever.
Yeah. The golden retriever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll talk about them too in relation to a boss figure too, because that also changes the dynamic, especially if you're in that position. But generally speaking, so the amiable wants to keep peace at whatever cost. So now if you put an amiable and a driver together, you've got an interesting combination, because you have one that's trying to run from conflict and one that's pushing against it at all costs. Right,
Boy,
right?
talk about like how uncomfortable the amiable must feel with a driver. And we're really, what the purpose of this conversation too, Kylie, for everyone that's watching, is within my mentorship of Mike Ferry for years and years, he's always talked about in sales, if you don't learn to adapt well to the styles of personality, you're going to lose about 75% of your business that you could do.
Yes.
And so if you're a driver and you're pushing hard to an amiable and they can't relate, they're running from you and you're trying to pound on them, right? Is that right?
And also what I come to understand too, and why the personality styles are so important, is people are everywhere in your life. You're married to them. You have children that are different personalities. You have coworkers that are different personalities. You have bosses that are different personalities. You have clients that are different personalities. And so what can tend to happen, kind of like you were saying at the beginning, is you're just like, you're so frustrated with someone because you're like, why aren't they thinking like me? Well, of course they're not thinking like you. They might be a totally different temperament than you. They're processing information in a whole different way than you are. And so it creates an undue level of frustration because you're like, I just don't understand. And it can create a lot of tension just from a lack of knowledge that there are different temperaments that people have. So when you can come to understand them, understanding them is the first step. Understanding actually lets you soften and be like, okay, this person is acting in their temperament, right? But then the next level is to then learn to adapt to that person.
To adapt to any of the different styles is the challenge because it's not easy to do.
Yes.
So as a driver, if I'm looking at an Amiable and they're wanting to be a people pleaser and I'm a result-driven person, and I don't learn how to adapt to them. Let's just say they're my client because that makes it really easy.
Yeah.
If they're my client and I want to help them solve a problem, right? Let's say they're buying a home or they're buying a car or we're in the sales process and there's some sort of goods or services being purchased.
Yep.
As a driver, if I continue to act like a driver to an Amiable, I'll turn them off.
You will shut them down. And then the hardest part with Amiables is they'll never show that they're shut down. So they'll be really still friendly to you, but all of a sudden you'll notice that they'll just pull away because they're uncomfortable and they don't want to confront you. So they're like, this person just makes me uncomfortable. I just don't want to be around them.
I've seen those types of things even within the company that we run here where I'm me and they're them. And then we think there's probably a good relationship there. But as long as I continue to act that way and they are who they are, which is who they are, and the next thing you know, they're no longer here and you're going, well, what just happened?
Yeah.
Because what happens is they were uncomfortable even though you never knew they were uncomfortable.
Well, they were consistently uncomfortable. So, I mean, because they're also ones, it's like, it takes them a lot to feel like they have to lose a relationship. So the one thing important to notice about the Amiable is they are completely fearful of losing relationships. So they value relationship more than results.
Interesting. So when let's just say they work for a company and they're coming to work for the company, they want to have a relationship to feel good about the work they do.
Correct.
And if you're a driver and a CEO of a company, you want results.
And
so how do you balance those two things out?
Well, and I think that it depends on the person who's the more knowledgeable on the temperaments, right? So if you're the boss and you understand that your employee or your, in our industry, it's independent contractor, so your agent is an Amiable, well, it's like, well, this person they need support. Because they're going to be more complacent, right? So they're not as results driven. They're more relational driven. They like harmony, right? So they're going to be less oriented to drive their business forward. So they do need your support, but they need it in a lot of encouragement, a lot of positive feedback. Their criticism needs to be toned down a lot. And if you are going to give them critical feedback, it really needs to be wrapped in a lot of sugar.
So that personality style, though, I think if I was to be any personality style, an Amiable, I think, seems the most favorable. Everybody likes them. They're easy to get along with. They're great coworkers, but they're not results driven. They're relational driven.
They're relational driven, and they're also process driven. So they're not as like end goal oriented. So if you need them to do something, you really have to work on their schedule and their habits. So they're not going to be like, if you set a goal, well, I need you to do this many transactions. That's going to be less driving for them versus like, if we blocked out this time for your prospecting, can you get here and do your prospecting? Can you do your role play in this time? And so they're going to be more inclined to do their day-to-day behavioral habits and less likely to be focused on an end goal.
So if I'm coaching or training an Amiable, I have to change how I direct my message, right? So I used an analogy one time when we were talking about prospecting. And this was to an agent who we had working with us who was an extreme Amiable. His name is Tom. We'll save his last name. And so I know you know who that is. And so, I think Tom and I had a little prickly relationship in the beginning because I'm a driver and I wanted to get results.
Yes.
And so finally I learned this from him. And I said, let's take it like this. Because he didn't like the negative side of what prospecting brought or how he felt prospecting brought to him.
Yeah.
And I said, let's imagine this. Let's imagine that we're in a lifeboat and that there's all these people in the water and you're throwing a life raft to them and you're trying to help them and you generally feel like you want to help them,
Mm-hmm.
save them, put them in your lifeboat. And he's like, okay. And he's like, you could see he was really into this conversation, right? Now, normally I'd be going, prospect, don't worry about what people think. But now I'm changing the analogy. And I'm like, and you're throwing out the life raft, and the person who is in the water is going to sink or swim and be saved. And that person decides that they're not going to grab the life raft. They're going to just go ahead and wait for the next life raft until they drown, right? Or until they potentially drown. And so you have to look at it like you're rowing over to the next group of people and you're throwing in your life raft. And what was interesting is I went through this process and I said, some will, some won't. Some are going to say yes. Some are going to have some thoughts in their mind that something better might come along. But we can't be attached to saving them, because if they say no, they say no, we move on.
Yes.
Right? A driver doesn't approach things like that, but an amiable, which is in this particular person, Tom, actually really related well to that, because he looked at it now and said, oh, what you're saying is I'm trying to help people.
Yes.
And so what was fun, and it was an aha moment for me, it's like, yes, you're trying to help people.
Yep. Yeah.
And he could relate to that. Now, my old style was just call all these people. Someone's going to eventually say yes, and practice your scripts and your dialogues.
Yes.
Nope. But it wasn't until I put the analogy to that it actually made sense. So
yeah.
I think what's important that we all understand is that we are one of these 4 styles.
Yes.
And within those 4 styles, 75% of the people, if we don't adapt to them, we're not going to serve them very well.
Correct.
So we have to change our personality to get them to feel good about us.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. And there's really 2 types of amiables too, if you look at it, where one is a little more oriented to helping people. So they're like, I want to be really helpful. Mm-hmm. And that one's going to have a little bit of a sanguine expressiveness to their amiable personality. And then the one that's the true amiable actually has a little bit of analytical in there, but they are predominantly amiable. And that's the one that really just wants to keep the peace. So they're less oriented. They might be helpful, yes, but they're more oriented towards just generally keeping the peace.
Do they make good salespeople?
They can. They can. We even have an agent right now, very young. And they can be really good salespeople because they're very likable and they can bring their clients a lot of peace.
Because they have a nurturing personality, so they make people feel good.
And particularly in real estate, right? It is a really emotional type of selling, right? Because whatever situation is causing someone to move, no matter what their personality style is, can carry emotion underneath it, right? And so an amiable has a way of calming somebody down through that transactional process and guiding them to the end. The hardest part that they're going to struggle with is having hard conversations that they need to have, and sometimes that is required. Mm-hmm. And so generally we find that they do not do as well.
Yeah, because they want to bring joy to the life of the person they're working with. And in sales, sometimes it's not that. So in some jobs, they probably do really well. Yes. In the world of real estate, which is the world that we live in, because there's, I don't want to say confrontational, but confronting conversations maybe is better, because we have to have some confronting conversations to help them. That's where they challenge the most. So
they actually make extreme, and this is not it's not to degrade them. This is just really where they thrive. They do really well in supportive roles. So really good assistants, really good, like right underneath, like the main person, because they really want to please.
Yeah.
And they can be fairly detailed enough to do that thing. So they're really good at taking command, especially. So if you put that, even though they might struggle with a driver, they're actually complementarity to a driver in that sense. So they can field what the driver cannot do.
Well, that's a really great point, because maybe a driver should have a different personality style, especially if they're dealing with clients, because that amiable personality, in this case, it probably can be another trait to a personality, but they will be able to deliver the message in a more empathetic way than maybe the driver style personality, because the driver style is just looking for results. We don't have a lot of empathy in driver personalities, or not a lot of empathy. And it's not that we don't care, it's we don't know how to show empathy, because we're very to the point and trying to get to the result.
Well, your primary goal is results drive, and then you think that everyone wants that too.
Correct. I mean, and I would say if you're an amiable, you feel like everyone is that way and
well,
feels
and you
that
think
way.
that everyone, and that's the thing is you think everyone should keep the peace. And then when somebody doesn't keep the peace, you want them out of your world, which is also a problem. So that is the problem with the amiable is that when they don't feel comfortable, and if they are in a position, so let's assume you're dealing with an amiable boss. Well, that amiable boss doesn't want anyone underneath them that rocks the boat in any way. Which is actually pretty problematic.
Yeah.
Right? Because then you can't grow and then you just feel uncomfortable when that person's around.
Wow. That's pretty cool. Okay. So we've covered driver, covered analytical. Those are the two.
Amiable.
Oh, I'm sorry. We call it amiable and driver.
Yes.
And by the way, why I wanted to start with that is they're the polar opposites. So you couldn't have two more opposite people, and yet we all have to work together. And if you say, well, I just don't like working with people like that. I mean, I don't like being around drivers. That's perfectly fair. You can choose your friends any way you want. But if you're in sales, you're also cutting out 25% of your opportunity, which could, and I don't know what business anybody is in here, but it could be significantly a lot of money if we aren't. I've learned, and my mentor Mike Ferry has always said, you want to sell more houses, learn the styles of personality, and work on adapting. Because there are some tricks, right, that people can do to become better. So let's talk about the next thing. Let's talk about an analytical. We'll do the expressive one at the end. So an analytical, and by the way, an analytical is the hardest one for me.
Yes.
Because I'm a driver, and so there is a big opposite here on this side, in that they're process thinkers.
Correct.
So let's go into the benefits of an analytical. Let's talk about a little bit how they operate, like what do they think of and why do they operate that way? And then we'll talk a little bit about their positives and then some of the challenges they have.
Yeah. So I think it's important to know analyticals encompass the majority of all four temperaments.
Meaning that there's more of that in everybody than just of any of the other traits.
Right. So drivers actually carry the least amount of the population. And if you actually think about it in terms of like our animalistic days, like when we lived in communities and we had to rely on like hunting and survival, well, drivers were the top of the pack. They led the community and they went out and hunted. Okay? You needed them. But you needed a lot of more supportive roles behind the scenes to run the community. So that's where your other temperaments come in. So you need less drivers in the world, right? Because they're more of the leadership. And you need more of the other personality styles. So amiables and analyticals encompass the majority of the personalities, but analyticals take the rank on personality styles.
So go into, if you can, what their thought process is.
Okay. And analyticals is the most diverse in the type of people that you're going to get and how, because they might carry another one of these four along with them. Okay.
So they could be an analytical and something.
And a driver, or they could be an analytical and an amiable, right?
But all styles will have a little bit of each.
All styles will have this, but analyticals carry the majority of the weight.
All right.
Okay.
All right. That's fair.
So the most diversity. But just as an overview, analyticals are extremely processed thinkers, right? So similar to an amiable, they care more about the details of the day than less about the end result, right? But unlike the amiable, they're more closely linked to the amiable than they are the driver, all right? But they're more detail-oriented, and they care more about things being done correctly.
So they overprocess and overthink?
They can overthink, but it's more so it's that they want things done right. They want to feel like they're doing the right thing, and most of the time, it's because these people are more internal about constantly worrying. They're internal worriers. And they're worried about doing the wrong thing. So they're constantly trying to work on doing the right thing and making sure that they understand what is right.
So what are the challenges then that people have? Let me back up. What are their challenges? Because we already know that they're a person who likes to get detailed information.
Yes.
But where does that fall short in communicating with other styles?
So the hardest thing is they're unlike the amiable, they don't have like a soft edge. Right?
Okay. That's good. I've never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. They don't have a soft edge.
No. So, and generally speaking, they're the most people that have to work on their likability, right? Right? Because even a drivers are interesting because drivers can be very likable and they can be very abrasive. So they have.
Does that balance between them being likable and being a driver balance out where an analytical has a challenge of getting
So they
that
don't
balance down?
have the abrasiveness that a driver has, but they don't have the warmy fluff either.
Oh, okay.
Because they're just like, they're so matter of fact. And they can be really rigid. So there's not a lot of flexibility. And it's because they're oriented towards safety. Again, it's like right and wrong and safety. So what will happen is outside of those parameters, they don't know what's right and they don't feel safe.
What makes them feel safe?
Facts, truths, tradition, things that are proven, statistics. Structure.
Yeah. So in the world we live in, it's fun because you'll have an analytical and they'll come and they'll go, hey, I want to break this down. And I'll look at them as a driver and go, why do you have all this information? Well, I mean, because this is what our clients are going to want to know. It's like, I don't bring that information, right? But in their mind, they have to make sure that every box is checked for whatever their checkbox system looks like. That all has to be checked in order for them to feel comfortable to present.
Correct. But don't get me wrong. These people can be very successful. Actually, very highly successful. So outside of if you see, I mean, a lot of bosses are drivers, but the next you're going to see is analyticals. Mm-hmm. Right? They're very smart. You'll see a lot of them in tech worlds, right? They're very system-oriented. They're very good at running organizations because they're methodical. They can run an entire system. They can break things down. They can make it digestible for somebody else.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to say here, if you're a driver running a company, you probably have analyticals doing all of the financial work.
Correct.
We do in this company where we have an ops manager who's analytical, and then my wife who runs the books and the finances analytical.
Yes.
So when you look at they're really smart people.
Really smart.
They're really detailed, which is what you want behind the scenes.
Yes.
But they're not always big thinkers.
Right.
Right. And they're not big risk takers because they calculate risk as fear, where drivers calculate it as an opportunity.
Yes.
Right. And so what's fun is if you have a driver who's running the company, he probably has analytical people actually supporting the system.
Well, and they actually desperately need it. Because what's interesting, and I go back to the driver in relation to the whole organization, a driver is not structured. They rely on their own work ethic.
Okay.
So they don't need the structure, but everyone around them does. Well, that's really hard for a driver to then implement because they don't need it, so they can't transmit it to somebody else. So they have to hire a bunch of people underneath them to create it. Because they can't.
So I'm having a little bit of an aha moment here because, and this will make sense to you, but when we have conversations in our management meetings, we talk about things that I believe they should be. And I know that you have brought up issues where it's like, yeah, but we have to have a guideline and a structure so they can follow it. And I'm like, they should just follow it because they're like me, meaning that's how my brain works, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm having an aha moment because you and I've had many conversations regarding the structure and the lines in which we draw that says these are our rules and we need to, and I would say, well, everyone should know that. And you might have that conversation and go, well, yeah, maybe, but we have to be A, B, C. We can't have any sort of black and white in the middle of any of that because they're going to take advantage of it or they're not going to understand it. Right? Is that fair?
Right. Well, and you have to think about the type of people, especially in our organization where it's real estate. And so you're either going to have the people that kind of go out and do their own thing, or you're going to have the people that come in and they're seeking leads and they're seeking structure. So immediately, you're automatically attracting amiables and analyticals by the type of company that we have. And what do they want? Clear direction and clear structure.
Yes, and what they struggle with is you do this and you do that. They want loving and caring and understanding. In that amiable side anyway, because we attract a lot of these amiable personalities. Man, I mean, I'm having some aha moments here myself, so I'm glad that we're talking about this.
But they also want a backbone. That's the interesting thing. Like, and it's kind of like I don't know, I've read a lot of, I'm not a parent, so I don't give parenting advice, but I've read a lot of things about the structure of that because I think it goes a lot with companies, is actually modeling the exact same thing. And they talk about the importance of kindness and boundaries and structure. You need the both and. I mean, a child feels really out of whack if their parent doesn't have any disciplines, but they feel really shut down if their parent doesn't empathize with them. right? So it's the same in our environment. It's like, well, they need the structure and they need the boundaries and they need the backbone. They need accountability. And they do want it, believe it or not, even if it looks like they don't want it.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, they need understanding and the approach and, gentleness through the process of creating those boundaries.
Yeah, it's complicated, and I think it's fun, too, at the same time when you think about how hard it is to understand the styles and how we have to change as people to adapt to getting them to feel comfortable with us. All right, so let's go to everybody's favorite topic, the expressive.
Yes.
So the expressive, who is always fun,
Yes,
always a joy, and always loud, and they're there.
they're there. Yeah.
By lots of how they dress, how they act, right?
Yes.
So talk about their traits a little bit.
Expressives are everyone's initial favorites. I mean, they can't help but make you feel good. They make you feel like you're their most important person in the world, but they make everyone feel that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're very fun. Their internal drive is to have fun. So that's important to know.
Because that drives them in their business, in their life, in their comfort, is knowing that everybody else is having fun with them.
Oh, yeah. They want to have fun. They want other people to have fun with them. They want to create the fun. Okay.
Okay, I like that.
Right?
Yeah.
And they make really amazing salespeople for that reason. I mean, really good at getting people to buy in because they make people feel so good. Unlike they're not like kind of lackadaisical. They can be really go-getters in some sense.
Yeah.
And then they can really not be, right? So,
yeah.
which we could talk about the dark side of that. But yeah, they're generally the life of the party. Yeah.
Yeah, they're such fun, and I love too, because if you ever want to identify an expressive, just look at the clothes they wear. Anytime I've ever done anything, I go to business meetings, you always see the expressives, and they got the colored socks and the funny looking and strange kind of bright colors.
Yes.
They're the ones that are the woohooers, and so that's exactly right. I mean, they're pretty easy to spot. They're a lot of joy to be around. I mean, it's pretty tough not to like an expressive.
Yes.
I mean, I've got a lot of them that I'm friends with that are expressives that I love to death. Their challenge is...
Well, their challenge is that because they like to have fun, if something is not fun, they don't do it, right? So sales can be really fun for a period, especially if they have something they're working for. If they don't have anything they're working for, they just won't work. And it's very hard to get them to work for something if they have no external reason to do so.
So do they have to manufacture fun thoughts and ideas through the work they do in order to keep them moving?
Yeah, so they're the one temperament that's most motivated by games. And you actually, if you want to motivate a sanguine or expressive, you have to have games.
So you have to have, that's important to know too as a company owner, because creating games, which you guys do a really good job. And just so you guys know, Kylie, who's also my daughter, is part of the sales training process inside the company. And so you and Nikki have done a really good job at creating games for the team.
Yes.
Now, as a driver, I'm like, okay, well, whatever you guys want to do is fine, but I don't get it.
Yeah.
But I understand, because every time we do games, and this is, I think, important for people to listen, as we do a game at a sales meeting or something, every single time people come out and go, that was the funnest sales meeting ever, right? And you're like going...
Yes.
Wow. Like, hey, listen, we didn't get anything accomplished. I didn't train you on anything. It's like, no, we just had fun, right? But I guess that's part of it.
Well, and here's the benefit of a game, too, for actually, I'm going to say for all four temperaments, okay? So an expressive needs it to feel motivated, right?
Okay, yeah.
Right? An amiable needs it because it yields harmony amongst the whole group because everyone's having fun. An analytical needs their energy raised. Mm-hmm. So it raises the energy of the room, which still helps an analytical even if they don't show it externally.
Yeah.
And even the driver, it's like, okay, well, it's not always about the end result. Like there is like community that's important.
Well, and that's important too, especially as a driver. You want all the things you talked about that the other traits desire. Yeah. You want that because as a driver, you want everyone to stay in harmony together.
Yes.
But we don't know how to create that. A lot of drivers can't manufacture that, which is why we have other people with different traits and personalities supporting our groups. Yes. Because we are the way we think.
Yeah.
Right? Drivers are get things done and create a vision for the company. Analyticals will support the day-to-day activity. Your salespeople are typically great amiables and expressives,
Yes.
right?
Well, and the irony is it still helps the bottom line because the agents are still the ones, I mean, in our company that drive the results. And if they're having more fun and doing more things, then they're like, well, then they're more inclined to keep doing it.
Yeah. Gosh, that's so awesome. So their challenge then also is the expressive is they're not very focused on staying on their schedule. They're
They do not want structure because structure is not fun. Right?
Oh, so they like so how do you take an expressive?
Yes.
Which, as you know, our background here is discipline, daily actions that create results.
Yes.
So for me, as a driver, I'm like, okay, I got to put down a plan of action. At 8 o'clock, I'm going to do this. At 9 o'clock, I'm going to do this. At 10, 11, 12, whatever. I thrive on completing that task.
Yes.
Right? I feel when I leave, I'm like, yeah, I completed, I got 90% of my day completed, right?
Yeah.
What you're saying is an expressive does not feel joy in that.
No. Well,
so how do you keep them? So if you know that they have to get this job done, how do you keep them in line?
Well, they're motivated by their external environment. So, I mean, and they'll take things to the extreme. So like, oh shoot, my bank account's got nothing. Well, I guess I better work today, and then they'll go sell 5 houses. Right?
Because they can be very focused and determined when they have to
When they have to be.
Because we have several agents on our team that operate in that manner.
Yeah. So then they'll do that. Then they'll, go take vacation for a while. Right? Because they just, it depends on their own personal standards. But especially if they have like external reasons. Obviously, we have an agent that has like a kid, has in a very expensive school, right? Yeah. So it forces her to have to work because she's got to pay for that education.
Yeah.
But when she didn't have that, she went through her own like ups and downs.
So they pick the things that they're motivated on.
Correct.
But it may not be the things that we think we want them to focus on. So with this particular individual you're talking about, we have to just keep hammering down her son.
Correct.
Because that is her internal motivation.
Yes. And I will say this. I mean, everyone needs accountability, but this has taken me a while to understand with the expressive is you need games and you need fun to help motivate them, but you also need accountability. Because if not, if they're in their state of like nothing external is motivating them, then you have to be like, I mean, for us, it's obviously the leads, but it's like, if you do not do this, you're losing your leads, right?
Yeah.
Because if not, you're going to be spinning your wheels in a circle because they don't have an external motive right now.
But they don't like that, though.
They don't like it, but they have to have it.
So how do you do that and make them have fun in the process, right?
Well, that's the thing is you don't. But the irony is they're going to run from structure at all costs. But, and this is, I'm going to say this with all the personality styles. You need each other.
Sure.
So you counterbalance off of each other. So just because an expressive doesn't like structure doesn't mean they need it. And if they're married, most likely they're married to someone who's structured because they need it, right?
Well, I think that's an interesting point. We should probably venture into that because we have a style that we feel comfortable with because that's our style.
Yes.
Right? And I remember reading a book one time, and I don't remember what book it was, but it'll probably come to me while we are filming or talking about this. You have a tribe, and you're going to approach another tribe who has a different set of values. And so in order for you guys not to kill each other, right, somebody of those two tribes has to adapt to the beliefs of the other tribe. So say things and act in a manner that causes that tribe to come forward more.
Yes.
Right? Even though we're different, who's going to win the battle of being more how can I put this? More like adaptive to the other style.
Yes.
Right? Does that make sense?
Well, and I think what's important to note too is you can all have the same values and different personalities, temperaments, right?
Correct.
So like, especially if you're working for a company. So a company is going to have a series of values. So externally, if you're coming into that company, it's not the company who's going to adapt. I mean, maybe you do if you recognize something that you want to implement. But generally speaking, the person coming into the company is not going to adapt to or you're not going to adapt to the value of the person. They're going to adapt to the values of the company. Right? but they're not going to change their temperament.
Well, this is where I think management in each one of these departments is important, because you might have a company owner, let's just say it's myself, and you have a certain way.
Yeah.
And that way is going to drive people out of the building.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Which is why we hire people that are different than us. But what's important, I also think, in those departments is that the person who leads those departments has a versatility in them to adapt to all styles to get people to perform.
Yeah, I mean, and this is why I encourage everyone to learn the personality styles, because again, no matter where you're at, if you're an employee, you got to adapt to the boss. But the most important person is in the position of leadership. If you're in a position of leadership, it's even that much more crucial. Because even though you can say, like, for our company, obviously, it's like we have a very driven culture. It's like if you're not driven, you're not going to survive in the culture. But at the same time, you're just like, okay, well, we can create structure. We can make games. We can make it fun. Like, it's like we can still adapt to the temperaments. We can provide detail. We can provide reasons why we do something for the analytical, right? So you can provide all those things for those temperaments, but at the same time, still holding the values of the company.
Yeah, and that's a good point. You don't have to change the values of the company to create fun for those that find value in fun.
Yeah.
You can also create structure and results-driven performance for those that actually need to have that.
Yes.
And if you can create fun for those that like and feel valued through fun, then they're going to be also results-driven based on how they feel. I mean, it's an interesting puzzle.
Yeah.
Because before I ever started any of these companies, you're like, okay, well, you just come to work, you do your job, and you go home. It's so much more complicated, or I have found that it's so much more complicated than that. So you mentioned something a minute ago, and so I want to tap into relationships, right? As you've all heard, like opposites attract, right? And so my wife and I and your mother and I are different styles of personality.
Yes.
She's patient.
Yes.
I'm typically not. She's very patient. Hey, well, why isn't this making you upset? She's like, well, there's really nothing to be upset about.
She's more logical.
Right? More logical. Yeah, I'm more logical. I'm more emotional when it comes to like expecting things to happen that don't. But different in a lot of ways. And I know that you're engaged to be married. And so when you look at you and the relationship you have with Derek, he's really opposite of you by every means.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But you still have a massive connection in a lot of the things that are valuable.
Yes.
But he's your strength in areas that you're not, and you're his strength in areas. So being opposite and still working for a long-term relationship in harmony is very, very possible with a lot of people.
Yes. But what is important too, especially if you're in marriage, is to understand that your spouse probably doesn't have your temperament. Right? You know? So, but I think that creates...
By the way, that took me 30 years. That took me 30 years. That was, you know, I don't even know. Like you know, we're all saying we're trying to figure it out. This is the most frustrating thing too about life and people who give up or they get divorced for whatever reason. And I'm not saying divorce is not something that happens or has to happen or you know, shouldn't happen. But I think people give up too early in a lot of areas. And it took 30 years for me to understand that my wife can have her life the way she wants it, and I can have my life the way I want it. She deserves to be her, and she deserves to have her opinion, and she deserves to have her own way of living life. Her problem was never her problem. It was my problem. My problem was her problem. So we're like, how do we work together? And it's just accepting that, hey, even though we're different, even though you, Derek, are going to be different, even though you're going to have an opinion, he's going to have a different opinion, it doesn't mean that we're not in harmony with each other about our common goals and living a long, beautiful, amazing life until death.
Yes.
Right?
Well, you have to have the same, it's like the important thing is you have to have the same core values. So I think like with you guys, it's like, well, you all are both pretty driven. You're driven in fitness, you're driven in business, you're driven in like the type of lifestyle that you want to have. So like the core of the two of you is on the same page, which is why it works. Yeah. But then you counterbalance off. So it's like you're more of a risk taker, the more like visionary, the more forward thinking, and then she's more of the stabilizer and then the structure person that you need. And then kids need both of that. It's like they need the counterbalance, because if you have one parent that's so, now obviously unfortunately there's broken families, and so
Yeah.
you're going to experience that. But,
Yeah.
which
of
is
life.
it's redeemable
Yeah.
still.
Yeah.
But the kids need the polarity within the house.
Yeah, and I think that part of it is like, oh, we're so opposite. It's like, well, we're God intended us to be opposite. I mean, that's why there was an attraction, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes I think we get caught up with. It's kind of like me saying, well, I don't understand why an amiable has to be so easygoing and so emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we're like, well, that's just who they are. They're the golden retriever of the personality styles, right?
Yeah.
Where the driver is probably more like the pit bull. Golden retriever and a pit bull don't typically always, get along. They're all from the same, 99% of the DNA is exactly the same, right? But they're just a little bit different, and that makes them a little bit different.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they can't get along. Just means that you look at the two and go, how do we make this work? But I guarantee if we have dog lovers out there, someone's going to say, well, I have a golden retriever and a pit bull, and they love each other.
Yeah.
It can work.
Yeah.
But it takes work.
It takes work.
And no different than having an employee that you have an expectation of because you like working with drivers or amiables or expressives, but you have somebody that says, I don't really like working with other drivers. So how do drivers and drivers work together?
Well, this is really the hardest thing. It's like, being a Catholic person, a Christian person, there's also a level of virtue, right? And so that's the ability to, we have a God-given temperament, but the reason it's called temperament is so that you temper your temperament. You have free will over your temperament, right? So even though you cannot change like your internal processing, you can control your way of responding to somebody else, right? Now this is really challenging. Because really, really challenging. Because especially, we'll just use the polarity of the driver against the amiable. You've got one person again that doesn't care about being abrasive, one that's terrified of conflict, and these two might be married to each other, right? Or you might be in a boss
and can work well
and can work really well because they counterbalance off each other. But for the driver personality, it is realizing like being abrasive is not patient, and that's not a virtue. Mm-hmm. Impatience is a vice, right? Yeah. And it means it causes harm. It causes harm to somebody else. Mm-hmm. So for them, if they're going to learn to meet the amiable, then they're going to say, I've got to really learn how to, and still be end goal focused. I do want harmony for this relationship. I do want to solve this problem. So how can I think about this so that I actually get to the end result that I want from this conversation? And then usually it's not going to be abrasive, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because just a person that I know comes to mind who is a driver personality, analytical driver, but driver maybe more analytical. Driver analytical, so not analytical driver, which means his dominant is driver. Yeah. His secondary is his analytical side, which we all have pieces of it all, but we have I'm a driver expressive. You're
I'm an analytical amiable.
Analytical amiable.
So I'm predominantly analytical, but I do have an amiable side.
Amiable side, yeah. And your mother would say she is analytical, amiable.
Yeah.
I think she has an amiable side, but I wouldn't say that is her.
I think she's a driver. I think she's an analytical driver.
I think and maybe I've identified that she's become that, or maybe she's always been that, and I just decided to see it after 30 years. But what's interesting is when you look at your spouse, you have to look at why you were with them, like what sides of their personality were you attracted to the most? Where do they balance you out from your weakness?
Yeah.
Right? So she has a lot of strengths where my weaknesses are, and where I am the weakest is where I needed most of the strength in order to amplify my strength and where I was the most strong. And what I'm saying is like I had strengths and I had weaknesses. Because of her strength, it actually made my strength even more, my superpower even more of a superpower.
Yes.
Right? And I've said this to people all the time, like, had I not married your mom, I would either be a billionaire or homeless because I don't have any sort of, I have issues with risk, right? This sounds like a great idea. Let's spend all of our money doing this. And thank goodness that she has a sensible mind. She's like, whoa, slow that train down.
Let's think through this decision.
We don't need to think through it. I mean, come on. I'm a self-charger, and she's just like, whoa, hold on, pump those brakes. But what's really great though, and what works is on her analytical side, if you break down and she looks at it and she processes it, she will take risk. So it's not like she's not a risk taker. And one thing about her too that's very interesting is she's a good, fast decision maker, which is not typically a trait that an analytical has. They want a long process. That's her driver side.
So she's what I call, and this is where I say that analyticals have the most diversity and they cover the most. She's like the achiever type of analytical, which is the achiever type actually does carry a strong driver in their personality.
Yeah.
And so they are structured and they are detailed like a typical analytical, but their entire motivation is to achieve the goal.
Yeah.
So it's probably what attracted you guys in the beginning. Here you have someone who's like a challenger, I'm results driven.
Yeah.
And then you have this person who's like, I'm stable and I'm logical, but I want to achieve.
Well, what's interesting is because of my background, I had such unstable life early on.
Yeah.
And lots of probably insecurities. And so when I found, and I don't know why it was her, right? I mean, you don't know when you meet somebody why that happens.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's not like you didn't date anybody else before, or you didn't have girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever before. You do, but something about somebody says, this is my person, and why?
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes you don't always know why. Sometimes you're like going, I don't know, it's just there and I can't figure it out why. But as you get older and you learn to grow through things, you start understanding that if I didn't have this personality style, you know, God has an interesting way of putting people together, right?
Yes.
And that if you really look at it, I don't really feel like my life would have been anywhere near the success it had I not had somebody with all of her traits. And so there was a much further visioned plan than I could ever see that caused the result. And so I think for all of us as business owners too, about these personality styles, is we probably have the right people in our organization. We probably just have the wrong approach to keeping them moving forward.
Yeah, it's the adaptability.
So as owners of companies, it's our ability to be able to adapt that allows those people to thrive. And because we don't understand personality styles, we have lots of turnover because of how we approach things. And as we all know as business owners, it's having turnover inside your company is extremely expensive.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're running people off after you're training them, working with them for a year or two, and then they're gone, and you got to go through that whole process again.
Well, and imagine this. It's like, imagine if, and not that they might not fit your values, and that the people can leave because they don't fit your values. I think that that's okay. But imagine if they were like, man, that person really met me where I was at and tried to help me move forward. I mean, that type of person would be so loyal.
Yeah.
And do whatever they could because they're like, this person really tried, this boss or this, like, really tried to meet me where I was at instead of demanded that I come to, like, and they didn't make me adapt to them. They adapted to me.
Yeah. Talk about a loyal employee or friend for a long time if they feel valued and heard. And, you know, as I'm thinking about all of this, you know, our top agent inside of our business, who is a driver analytical, right? And so I think where I relate really well in coaching, and I brag a lot about her, is that she's coachable, but she's a lot like me in that area of being driven and result driven, right? And so in putting it all together, you're like, well, gosh, you know, I really like this person because of they respond to me. But what we should probably be doing is saying, I got a really great person over here, but I just haven't learned to connect with them well. And what's it costing us not to figure out how to connect with that person well? Because what we want to do is say, hey, this is the system. This is how it works. Do your job.
Yes.
But yet they might be qualified to do the job. They might have the best intention to do the job. We're just not communicating right. And we're either going to fire them or they're going to quit. But one of those two things are going to happen.
Yeah. And I do feel like a lot of that is a misunderstanding. It's literally a misunderstanding of two people. Because I truly believe this, and I'm not speaking for everybody, but I do think that the majority of people want to feel like their work is valuable, that they're engaged in their job. And I do, more than anything, they do want to feel like their work environment, they like the people that they work with, that they're feeling seen and heard, and that they feel like they have a position that they can keep growing in.
Yeah.
And someone that they really want to get behind that can really help them move forward.
Yeah.
So I do believe that about a lot of people. Now, because of all life things, vices, virtues, temperaments, it can create an interesting dynamic with the person. But I think as leadership, if you can learn to meet somebody where you're at, you'll get the best out of someone.
Yeah, and that's always the hardest thing to do, right? Is to try to adapt to what somebody else thinks because you think we're right. Right? I love this saying. It says there are no idiots in the world until you show up. And that means like, well, everybody else is in harmony until Bernie walks in the room and then I create a ruckus, right?
Yeah.
Or there's there's a great book out there and I can suggest people read it. It's called Surrounded by Idiots. I think you read that book, didn't you?
Yeah.
It's about personality.
Well, it's the same four, but they use colors.
They use colors.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reds and blues and greens, I think, or something like that, right? So yeah, it's just the colors. But it's a great book if anybody wants to read that. It's a powerful, powerful book. But I think that in the end of this this podcast, I think it's important for people just to reflect on the fact that do I have a bunch of unproductive people in my company, or am I causing the unproductivity because I can't connect? And if you can't connect, you have to ask yourself, you're probably not connecting because they're a different personality than you, and you're not willing to understand it. And so it's costing us a lot of money as owners by not adapting. So I do believe in Mike when he says 75% of your business is lost if you don't adapt to the style, because you're going to adapt really well to people like you because they're in your tribe.
Yep.
But outside of that, you're like, well, that person's an idiot.
Yeah.
Right? And you're like going, oh my God, I can't believe that that's actually happening. And in reality, they're feeling the same way about us. And then it's a bad relationship and unproductive. Well, I want to thank you. That was fun. I always love doing these things with you. And so hey guys, listen, I'll just say this to you. If you want any more topics on personality styles, Kylie and I would be happy to and I would talk with her about anything because she's really smart. How many books do you think you've read on human behavior? I mean, because I know you were really heavy on human behavior, right?
Yeah, I love it. Again, I think it's
fascinating. Couple hundred books, maybe?
Yeah.
Probably a lot, right?
A lot, yeah.
Yeah. And then also on personality styles, you've studied all these different traits of styles. And so, as we've talked about before, that there's so much knowledge in every book, and you get like a lifetime of somebody's experience of life in each book you read. And so, Kylie's a big reader, and so am I. And so, if you guys have thoughts and topics, we'd love to share those with you. Kylie, thank you for being on this with me. And all you guys, again, I want to say this at the end, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And we are going to be doing lots of these videos each and every week about trying to move people forward. Remember, success is never convenient. It takes a lot of work. Everybody have a great day.